Tucker Carlson's recent newsletter asks a pretty provocative question that's sure to draw the wrath of Mark Levin and the rest of the neocon establishment, which means I'm all over it. I love it. I want to talk about it. So his latest morning newsletter is titled, "Could a Nuclear Iran Stabilize the Middle East?" And you should know that privately I've been raising this question, because there is a political theory in the world of political science known as the political peace theory, and we're going to visit that and discuss it in just a moment. But first, I want to kind of go through the arguments made in this newsletter, and you can decide for yourselves if you think it makes any sense. So, Tucker Carlson notes that there are all sorts of countries now that have nuclear weapons, right? Unhinged genocidal regimes, for instance, like Israel. Now they have a clandestine nuclear program that they have not entered into the non-proliferation treaty because they're above the law, and apparently we operate in a global double standard where they get to do whatever they want. Their treachery is never punished. But there are other countries like North Korea, for instance. North Korea has nuclear weapons and has had nuclear weapons since about 2006. Is anyone up at night, or rocking themselves in fetal position in bed every night over North Korea using a nuclear weapon against us? No. And that's kind of the point that was made in this newsletter. So Tucker cites warnings that presidents and cabinet members gave in the early 2000s about how Kim Jong-il, so that's Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, if he obtains a nuclear weapon, it's so dangerous, the world's gonna end. Well, that included William Perry, who happened to be Bill Clinton's defense secretary. And here's what he said in 2003, 3 years prior to North Korea obtaining a nuclear weapon. "The nuclear program now underway in North Korea poses an imminent danger of nuclear weapons being detonated in American cities, detonated." Okay, so just simply having access to the nuclear weapons, the North Koreans, they're so barbaric that they'll immediately use it against American cities. Okay. Now, Tucker writes that those warnings sound pretty scary, right? But the past 20 years have proven them unwarranted. North Korea became a known nuclear nation in October of 2006, and its proliferation has yielded a total of 0 nuclear strikes on America, the West, or any other country. The fear-mongering was for nothing. Well, if the political establishment in the United States isn't engaging in fear-mongering, what else would they do? I mean, yes, fundraising, I get that. But other than that, literally, what else would they do with their time? So Tucker then connects that history with the very similar warnings that we are hearing today, especially in regard to Iran, from people like Benjamin Netanyahu, who says that there is only one difference between Nazi Germany and Israel. Nazi Germany and the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran is first seeking atomic weapons, and once it has them, will then start a world war. But Tucker asks America's leaders, to maybe consider some, important questions before engaging in a regime change war with Iran in order to prevent them from accessing or obtaining nuclear weapons. First, he asks, what are the chances Iran would actually launch a nuclear attack? And I think that's a legitimate question, of course. But he argues it's unlikely. No country in the so-called axis of evil, that's Iraq, Iran, and North Korea, has ever deployed a nuke because doing so would be an act of suicide. Yes, mutually assured destruction, right? You launch a nuke, there will be retaliation from another nuclear power, and the world ends. It's just Armageddon. And it's not, of course, Western countries only that have nuclear weapons. Pakistan has nuclear weapons, North Korea has nuclear weapons. I'm not up at night worrying about them. But there is one thing that nuclear weapons have afforded the countries who have managed to obtain them. And that tends to be the US leaving them alone for the most part, So the next controversial question he asks is, could Iran obtaining the bomb wind up being a good thing? Whether anyone in the foreign policy establishment admits it, North Korea's nuclearization has undeniably stabilized the Korean peninsula. The region has seen no wars, coups, or interventionist forced regime changes since 2006. Then he asks, would Iran becoming a nuclear power have the same effect on its region? Could it finally prompt America to leave the area alone and incentivize Israel to drop its stated goal of controlling the Gaza Strip and the West Bank? Would it make the Iranian government less oppressive because it wouldn't have to worry about the West's constant decapitation ambitions? I think that's a legitimate question. I'll give you another example. I mean, why is it that the US isn't allowing Ukraine to go balls to the wall in regard to Russia? Well, because it's a delicate matter. Russia has nuclear weapons, which it has threatened to use time and time again. Now, do I think Russia's actually gonna use nuclear weapons? Honestly, I don't. But it has kind of restrained the US. And I think in certain instances, especially when you have a president who's drunk off military power, as Trump is at the moment, you want to have some brakes on the car. And I actually do think Iran having nuclear weapons would prevent the US from invading and pushing for a regime change, not for us, obviously, but on behalf of Israel. And I would like to prevent that from happening, actually, to be honest. Now, some might disagree with this whole theory, but I want to give you one more statement or one more excerpt from the newsletter in which Carlson writes that defending the Iranian government is not the purpose of raising these points, and I believe him on that. I've got no love for the Iranian regime. All we want to do is introduce America's national conversation to a different point of view. Maybe the premise of why the US must bomb the Islamic Republic's physics facilities is false. Maybe other parts of the official narrative on the Middle East aren't true either. So let's talk a little bit about nuclear peace theory. I learned about it in grad school. I thought it was really interesting, yes, provocative, but honestly, it made a lot of sense to me. And one of the political scholars who's kind of known for his work on this theory is a political scholar by the name of Kenneth Waltz. He's the founder of structural realism. So real quick, what is the nuclear peace theory? It's also known as nuclear deterrence. So nuclear deterrence refers to a principle in international relations where the retaliatory potential and destructive force of nuclear weapons prevents nations from launching a nuclear attack. Again, the thought of mutually assured destruction prevents rational actors from actually using those weapons, right? Using the nuclear bombs. So if you know a country has the ability to destroy you, you are less likely to attack, or at least reconsider or think carefully through the possibility of attacking. So the theory's roots are in the Cold War era, when a third world war was averted despite tensions between the United States and the Soviets, right? The USSR. So one of the main proponents of the nuclear peace theory is Kenneth Waltz, the founder of structural realism. And according to a 2011 article from the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs, as a structural realist, Waltz's beliefs are centered on the conception of states, meaning countries, as unitary rational actors. He argues that states seek survival above all else. This interest in survival leads policymakers and military officials to avoid nuclear war at all costs. As Waltz sees it, no regime can honestly believe it will survive a nuclear war, so mutually assured destruction creates a more secure environment. The reason why Israel does not want Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon isn't because they're worried Iran's gonna use a nuclear weapon against Israel. They're worried that by the mere fact that Iran has nuclear weapons, Israel will no longer be successful in its push to get the US to carry out a regime change war in Iran. And as we know, the Israelis want full dominance of that region. That much is clear. Some because they believe in the Greater Israel Project, meaning stealing more land in the region. Others because They want to be more powerful than Iran, and they want to prevent them from obtaining the nuclear weapons because that deterrence is power. It is. That ensures that your country is going to survive. I mean, another perfect example is Ukraine, actually, in that they gave up their nuclear weapons through negotiations with the United States back in the 1990s. Now, if Ukraine had nuclear weapons, would Russia invade? Would Putin invade the way that he has? I mean, look, we're guessing, it's speculation, but I would guess not. I would guess not. Because at that point you have two nuclear powers and maybe you reconsider invading a sovereign country and annexing their land. Here are some examples, by the way, that Waltz has given to back up his arguments. Although American officials claim Saddam Hussein was irrational, Hussein did not strike Israel with lethal warheads during the Gulf War, displaying an instinct for self-preservation. Waltz also points out that although the Kim dynasty in North Korea has long been derided for unpredictability and irrationality, Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung have always stopped short of attacks that would risk the regime's survival. So let's take a look at Iran real quick. Let's just revisit Iran's response to the United States bombing its nuclear sites. What did Iran do? Gave the United States fair warning. US was able to evacuate nearby military bases. And then Iran engaged in, honestly, theater to pay lip service to their own people so they can say, hey, we did respond to these US and Israeli strikes against our country. But no US troops were killed because they were restrained. We didn't get dragged into a regime change war in the summer because Iran was restrained. So if you ask me, when it comes to which country I'm more concerned about as it pertains to obtaining nuclear weapons, am I worried about the country that has shown its restraint on the international stage, or am I worried about the country that has a clandestine nuclear program that is not part of the non-proliferation treaty and has threatened on multiple occasions to engage in nuclear war if they don't get anything and everything that they want? And of course, I'm talking about Israel. Yeah, I'm more worried about Israel, but they've got the nukes. There's nothing you can do about it at this point. So do I think Iran obtaining nukes would potentially stabilize that region? I do, actually. I do. Do I think that Israel might reconsider the atrocities it's committing in the region if they didn't have the protection of the Iron Dome? I do. We're talking about human beings and they're motivated by incentives and disincentives. That's how this works. And honestly, when it comes to rationality, I would argue we've seen more rationality and more restraint from Iran than we have from Israel. Just tell me, I mean, if you disagree, let me know. How many countries in the region has Iran bombed in the last 2 years? Because Israel's bombed a lot, yeah. And they violated every single ceasefire, every single, peace agreement. And it's not just Gaza, it's not just the West Bank. We're also talking about Lebanon. Remember, there's a ceasefire in Lebanon. They're not abiding by that. So again, we're talking about human beings motivated by incentives and disincentives. All of the incentives for Israel right now is for them to carry out whatever they want because they're not worried about consequences. Just something to consider. And by the way, nuclear weapons aren't going away. Like, I know the hippie crowd, the older crowd who hate nuclear weapons, I hear you, but they're here and the nuclear powers are not gonna get rid of them. So we live in this weird topsy-turvy world where it doesn't matter whether your country was powerful prior to obtaining the nuclear weapons. Like Pakistan's another example, right? We're not gonna mess with Pakistan. They've got nuclear weapons. But are we worried about Pakistan using nuclear weapons? Personally, no, I'm not.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.